Welcome to the law, your money, and you. This is Roberta Saphire. I'm an attorney in Sharon. And
I'm Camille Barron. I'm a healthcare advisor and financial organizer also in Sharon, Massachusetts. And we're delighted to have Jerry Saphire back with us today because he always has a wealth of information to share.
yes, hi Jerry. Wave hi to the
Hello, everybody.
viewers. There he is. And what we
Hi.
thought we would talk about today, because Jerry is a wealth of information and is our business expert on the coronavirus is coming out of it from the States, and the States are a little bit different. But Jerry, give us an overall sense of what's going on with businesses out there?
Right now, I'm thankful that I personally myself am not in business, so I have to deal with it from a personal standpoint. That's for openers.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
I do feel badly for some of the people that are involved in business today, particularly if there's what you call a small business. That's really a problem. Why? That's really a problem because if you're not set up such as the big companies are today with deep pockets, that's the best way to get through it, because you can stay off on the sidelines and you can wait until you're able to do what you're supposed to do, to service people, sell your product, provide your service, and start in again where you were.
What are some of those businesses off the top of your head who can survive no matter what?
Well, I'm talking about let's say what they call big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, or some of the Best Buys, Walmart, some of the big companies. Although none of those companies are even big probably compared to the Amazon. It's amazing that you can have a company so quickly, so young, and come up the way that they have. But that's by a billionaire anyways, That's all. But anyways, I'm talking about a small business. Let's say one of the industry areas that has been desecrated by the coronavirus, let's say the food service business, and pretty much all the aspects of it, from the restaurants to the banquet facilities and everything else that goes along that serves food on the peripheral, like the movie theaters and the concert things and all of that stuff. They've been decimated because they have had their income totally stopped for the most part. Some of the smaller places have been able to do, their pickup and delivery and call-in orders and stuff like that. But that doesn't supplant the other area of the business, the main area which involves serving those people, the dining in. Forget about just the small businesses that compose the small restaurant and food service business, but what about all the service people, the waiters, the busboys, the bus gals, all the peripheral people that go along with it.
What do you think's going to happen with those businesses, Jerry?
Well, I think a large percentage of them may end up going out of business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just guessing. If I had to guess, I don't know, maybe 20%, 15, 20, 25. It's the industry. Restaurant business is a tough business, food service to begin with.
Yeah.
The mortality rate of your average restaurant is much, much higher than it is for any types of other businesses. And within a 5-year period, if you're running a restaurant, there's a good chance, you may not, if you're starting from scratch, there's a good chance that restaurant won't be around 5 years later.
And that's in good times, never mind a pandemic, right?
Yeah,
What about the states? What are the states doing now? Aren't they a lot of states opening up?
Well, yeah, and I'm confident. I feel optimistic, very optimistic about that. I think that's going to be a great growth time that we're in for the next. I think maybe the next couple of years, I think there's going to be a boom. I'm amazed even now that the market is at the heights that it is when you consider that our entire economy has been shut down.
Exactly. I know what you mean. It's
Completely shut down. And how and whether that was a good idea from the beginning, who knows? We all know that the less people that gather together, the better it is, because the less spread you're going to get on the virus. That's a given. But at the same time, to end up with an economy where there's as many people, if not more, that don't even want to exist if they lose their business that they've worked at for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or they can't put food on the table for their family. You know, that's a choice of, how do you die? Do you want to get shot or you want to get hung? There's not much of a choice. But right now, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is beginning, and I think we're in the latest stages in comparison to some of the other states. There's at least well over the majority of states, 30, 35 states that have already started and into it. Massachusetts, of course, was the third highest in having the coronavirus prevalent in its citizenry. So as a result, it's decided to go the slowest in terms of coming back into the economy, trying to keep the spread as minimal as possible by keeping people apart as much as possible. So but they're into it now. They've started it, and they're supposedly going to have 4 stages of it. And depending upon how your business is categorized, that depends upon how you're able to start back and get into business again. If you're in the 4 phases, the first, second phase is composed of the necessary places that are quote unquote essential, and the third and fourth are the ones that are more at the end of the line, like the hospitality business, which affects the recreational type of things, concerts and that stuff, and let's say like the gyms and those places. So they come like third and fourth. So it's already started. And there's, I think, a few weeks interval between each phase of it. And
it's interesting. I hate to interrupt, but we go to Arizona a lot, and I got a notice last week that the gym that we go to is opening up in Arizona, but the exact same gym has not opened up here yet.
Yeah.
And yet it's the same thing. So that's interesting. One thing about the gym was they said that they weren't going to charge while they were closed, which was good. So they must I'll give them a plug, Planet Fitness. I mean, they have to be hurting.
They've closed their rates. They are hurting, but miraculously, their stock has not fallen as much as it did. Their stock at one, I think it's about 75 or 76 now, and it's come back quite a bit. At one point during the pandemic, it was down into the late 40s.
Yeah, Jerry's a stock follower. Tell us about the stock market. What's going on?
Well, the stock market is going gangbusters right now, and I think the absolute main reason is because our economy is now starting to come back. And the way that it looks, I think it's going to be coming back gangbusters, which means that this epidemic of lost jobs, I mean, we all know that's due to, the people that in the end, everybody is subject to the stay-at-home order. Companies have had to lay off people, and which they may very well at the time should have been the thing to do. I don't know. That's still an open question maybe. But based upon how it ended up with the economy and everything else, and things, we seem to have flattened the curve. So we certainly are in the right direction. But it's still amazing to me that considering we've had no economy, this hasn't happened. Well, I know it hasn't happened for the last 100 years, because the last epidemic we had was in about 1918, a virus epidemic. And so for the last 100 odd years, we've always had an economy. But when you consider that the market is pretty well kind of like 95 to 98% back to what it was before this whole thing happened, it's absolutely amazing. With no economy, it's all because people are so exuberant and enthused and excited about being able to get back to a normal life again, with a normal job again, with normal family things that you can do again. And I think that that's making people all, just shining with enthusiasm. And so everything's come back, and especially the market. And I think a lot of these other companies will come back. But I'm still concerned about the restaurants for the short term, because you have to make it through the short term to get to the long term, which is being able to stay in business. In the long term, yeah, once you're, back riding again and everything's back to closer to normal like it should be, your normal spread that you have in business, differential from income to expense, that can be there once things are settled down. But in the short term, it's a different ballgame, because how do you take a restaurant that has a capacity of, let's say, 150 people and limit the attendance to that restaurant to, let's say, 50 people, because they're talking
out of business.
How do you survive with doing that? Even the tips probably wouldn't be enough to keep the waiters and waitresses going. So that's a big question in between. How is that going to work out? I don't know. Hopefully they'll be able to get back to dealing with the occupancy levels that they have under their licenses. But we'll have to see what happens. But if that doesn't happen in a quickly enough time, a lot of restaurants and other places might just give up.
And that's true of retail too. The stores right now, still in this phase, they're allowing curbside deliveries, curbside pickup. Yeah. But in the next phase, when they start letting customers in, there'll still be limitations. I mean, the stores that are open now, like some of the grocery stores, they have a certain allotment that they let so many people in the store. And that's probably going to happen even with the retail stores too.
Yeah, there's no question. It may be that restaurants, every business is different, and every business feels things in different ways than other businesses. But there's no question that if you're dependent upon people coming into your store for whatever your product is, if you can't get in enough people in order to make the thing work so that your spread for a profit to pay all your bills is enough, you're gonna be ending up going out of business. And it's amazing when you think of a giant business like Hertz Rental, and they went bankrupt. They're gone unless they're lucky enough to have somebody come back with the same name and maybe keep it going all over again. But it's quite a phenomenon when you think that you can take a business that's been established so well for over 100 years and boom, gone. It would happen to almost any business, no matter how successful it was, if somebody took a steel curtain and just drew it down over your income sources, and there was none anymore.
Mm.
And
I was reading the other day about restaurants in particular, because we're learning more and more about this virus. And what's known is that there's more of a risk if you're going to be in any place, in any business or anywhere else inside, if there's a longer exposure, if you're sitting down with people and you're, you may be there for an hour and a half versus just going to a grocery store where you're in and out for the most part. So that's really an issue. And then the air, this was in the article. They talked about the airflow and the quality of the air in these places, because it's only as safe as the systems that they have to bring in and to cleanse the air and come back in. The air conditioners, for instance, in the summer, because this virus, no, again, we're learning more and more. It passes mostly through air particles. So if you're sitting near an air conditioner in a big restaurant or a small restaurant, the air is being, it's being directed at people. And suppose there's somebody there who did have it and we didn't know, they didn't know, and the air is blowing around in there. You could be you could be affected. That's something that's a new kind of warning now about.
I hadn't heard of that, but I can understand it readily enough. I think you'd have to have, if that were going to happen, you'd at least have to have one person who does have that virus.
Yes.
Or anything.
I don't think that virus exists just all by itself anywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
But somebody would have to be in there. But now I understand that they're doing new things at some restaurants, maybe. And I don't know which ones offhand, but they call them like thermal temperature reading machines. And they're kind of like instant, where you just walk past it, I guess, and it gives you, if you've got it.
They just pointed at you.
Huh?
They pointed at you.
Oh, is that what it is? They pointed at you? Yeah, I was watching.
Yeah, they walked through the door. They're coming up with more and more things.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
There's a few businesses.
Yeah, that would help. That would help a lot if you had that instant testing. And the same thing, of course, if they did it so they could tell you whether you have, the virus or not. I think that ultimately, in order to really track this what's going on and have everybody feel safe, and the whole thing, success or ultimate failure of any business is based upon patronage. And if people in the end are still scared to go out and don't constitute the numbers of people that you need to exist, that's a bad thing. So you have to have consumer confidence in being able to go out without getting sick. And that's
Look
just
at all the new industries coming out of this. Mask making, temperature.
that's a whole new field.
The Chinese restaurants are doing fantastic. And I understand the casinos are now opened up. Maybe not all of them, but
a lot of them are starting to open up, and their stock is coming up. It's nowhere near where it was, before this whole thing started. But I think people are anxious to get out and start having some fun, and it'll be interesting to see how much having that fun supersedes the fear of catching the virus.
Yeah. Hey, Jerry, back to the stock market.
Yeah.
We know that it's thriving, and we're all thankful that it is.
Yeah.
But with unemployment being so high, I thought that one important element of the stock market, what's happening, rising or falling, is it's consumer driven. Sometimes the economy is consumer driven. If you remember when we went to that talk at Stonehill College, and the Federal Reserve president of this area, he mentioned that the economy is doing well in large part because it's based on consumer spending. What about now with the unemployment so high? It seems like consumer spending would be down, wouldn't you think?
Well, you would think that, and that would have been the case if the government, federal government, did not do what they did with that, what they call, I believe, the CARES Act. Mm-hmm. And what the government essentially did with like payroll, they call the PPP, Payroll Protection Program, what they essentially did is they saw and knew what would happen if people were in a position of exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. No money, because they're not working. So basically, what the government did is they anticipated exactly what would happen, and instead of requiring the people to work for their money, which they couldn't because the employers didn't have the money to give them, they were shut down and couldn't make any money. So there was no possibility of their employees hiring them and keeping them on a payroll. Mm-hmm. So basically what the government did is they subsidized the companies, the businesses, big and small,
Mm.
for their employees to continue employment with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, they rewarded them in a special way if it turned out that they weren't able to go back to work for whatever the reason happened to be with that particular business. And how they were rewarded special was, since they're now on unemployment, they kind of like doubled it and gave them an extra
Yeah.
$600 a week over and above what they would have got if they didn't have the $600.
Yeah, there are people that don't want to go back to work. They're making more money on unemployment.
So
than
now
before.
they're talking about providing money so that employees will be incentivized to go back to work and get off unemployment.
I don't know how.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose of it, I think, was a great idea, because you're 100% right, Camille. How can people spend money if they don't have it?
Right. Yeah.
Can't do it.
Right.
So
Yeah, and you know, another thing I was reading, I think yesterday, was they made a contrast between Wall Street and Main Street, and the fact that people, small businesses on Main Street, are not prospering yet for the very reasons you mentioned before, which is the things are still restricted in many cases. And it's a little different from the multinational corporations that they don't have to necessarily rely on people coming in every day for working. So the distinction between Wall Street and Main Street, that's always been kind of an issue anyway.
Yeah.
What's really happening on the streets versus what's happening with the large companies and the stock market. But it seems like now it would even be more of a distinction, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, because they each got their own thing. The stock market is the stock market. That's what they're concerned about. That's based upon the economy. That's what the stocks follow. Economy. And Main Street, you're not. They have their own economy with their own, patronage and everything. But it's on a smaller scale to each individual business as it relates to their customers and what their individual lives are like amongst, that strata of relationships. But
Yeah.
the stock market takes in the entire country.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
What do you think about
Each has to deal with the other, no question.
Okay. What do you think about like the strip malls or even the other malls where you have these companies and there's no money coming in, and yet the landlord's still got to pay mortgage or this or that, but the people don't pay them rent? What's happening with that?
Well, they were in deep trouble, and they still are. However, one of the largest mall owners, I forget which one it is, but I was watching TV there this morning on one of those market shows, and their stock was up about 5 points today.
Yes, are you talking about the regular shopping
I'm
malls?
talking about the malls.
Yeah, Simon. I think Simon is one of the biggest ones.
That's the one I'm referring to. It was Simon.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of buying some of their stock a while back, but there's so many other things that are still up for grabs that look good and stuff. So I didn't go into that because I can see where a lot of people would, be concerned, because things can happen at the mall, but they can happen anywhere. When they happen, it's an oddball, freakish circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, they like going to malls. It's kind of like exciting.
Mm.
There's a lot of people around, and there's different stores to go to. It's like alive with real people.
It's like sort of a social experience too, not just the shopping.
Yeah, it is. And
where Roberta can do her networking.
always networking, yeah. No, it's interesting.
If somebody rings the doorbell by mistake, I network.
But I think that but that's an interesting subject though about the malls and stuff, because one of the things that might come out of this whole pandemic is a change of people's feelings towards just shopping in general and moving around. in general. And I'm just wondering how far this might go in terms of people. For example, there was, I don't know what, maybe 10, 15% of people that, did their shopping online. It's always increased over the past 10, 15 years. But this is the very first time that we've had a stay-at-home order where people have been at home and not even allowed to go out shopping unless it was for an emergency or something.
Mhm.
And so for the first time, people had an opportunity to see what it was like to be at home.
Mm.
Probably a lot of divorces, a lot of child cruelty.
I'm sure that I heard from the different people who had input to some doctors and stuff that were telling them about some of these things. They said there's no question that the percentages of problems that families have and abuses of wives or
Yeah.
it's definitely gone up, and it's probably from being a lot of people being all cooped up, listening to yelling and screaming and driving themselves crazy.
And that usually just happens when the husbands retire and they spend more time at home. But we have to wind up. This has really been very good. Saphire can always be counted on
Oh,
for
he's great.
intelligent conversation. He knows about so much.
And he explains it so everybody can understand it. He doesn't use all these highfalutin terminology that people don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I hear that every now and then. Usually not that much, though.
So Camille's going to wind up.
Oh, yes.
Run up. What do we call you? Run up or wind up?
Wind up?
Run
Yeah,
up?
we can wind up, sure.
Wind up and
Jerry.
run up.
Jerry, thank you very much. Every time I speak with you, I learn something, and I'm sure our viewers have learned something today. It's been great to have you on. And even Roberta has learned something.
Yeah, I'm learning which stocks he's buying some more of.
So anyway, thank you. And to our viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been quite informative. And if you have other ideas about issues related to the coronavirus that we can be talking about here, we welcome your ideas. So please let us hear from you. Because remember, this is your show, the law, your money, and you.
And you. And we had to point, but that's good. And you.
I have a little point then.
And all of you. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.